Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer from Orthogonal. Thank you to all of you for logging in today for this webinar on the topic of Agile and Iterative Methodologies, specifically in MedTech and under design controls. For those of you who haven't been on an orthogonal webinar before or encountered us before, this is an extremely important and opinionated subject for us. We've actually sort of built a company on it. And so we're pretty excited to have this conversation. And we had our CEO, Bernhard Kappa, who's really sort of the father of orthogonal's vision of all of these things and been the driver of it for coming up towards 20 years now. And two of our good friends of Orthogonal who always have interesting thoughts on this, Jason Gorman from ResMed and Michael Iglesias from Merck, both of whom we've known for a while and engage with. I would like to think of this less as a webinar and more like a group of interesting people having a really spirited discussion over a beer at a bar that just happens to be on a webinar and, without the beer in hand. As we were just discussing, Agile's been around for 25 years now. TIR 45, which was the first sort of medtech guidance on Agile, is now had its bar mitzvah last year. Okay, so it's what, 14? So
Yes.
we've been doing this stuff for a while, but there's still a lot to learn. And I think it's a good time to take stock of what we've seen and what we've learned and maybe do a bit of a reset on how we approach this because there's been a lot of good. But I think there's been what everyone will tell you here is there's a lot of potential value yet to be realized. So very quickly on this, I'm going to say a couple words about orthogonal, just so you know we are. I'll also say if I call you afterwards for feedback on the webinar, please pick up the phone or reply to the email because really it's from all of you that we learn and make these webinars better. So very quickly on orthogonal, we're a medical device software development firm. We saw an opportunity to improve patient outcomes faster by helping medtech companies accelerate the development of software as a medical device and connected device systems. Basically, all the software you'll find in a device, unless it's firmware. And the way we do that is by taking the best of modern software engineering and product management tools and techniques that have really come out of the tech industry and impacted so many different industries and fuse them, as we'll talk about today, with medtech's focus on safety and effectiveness in a way that we think where modern software techniques and approaches can actually raise our game on medical devices as opposed to being a difficult thing to try and attach to medical devices and how we do things traditionally. Our capabilities run from mobile, cloud, AI/ML integration, Bluetooth, basically the connected pieces of medical devices on a range of devices, from class 1 to class 3. And we work in all the sort of core ancillary fields, and not even ancillary, but sort of the core subdomains these days: cybersecurity, HIPAA, GDPR, FDA domain expertise that are sort of a part and parcel of the larger package. Next slide, please. You can very briefly, you can hire us to build the software for you because you need help getting it out to market. You don't have the skills, you don't have the capacity. You can hire us on the right to co-build it with you and kind of help bring your teams, help you build out your capabilities as a part of the process. So we're embedded in a team with you. Or you can say, hey, folks, we don't really need your help building the software, but we would like to talk to you about how we can improve our game of Agile under design controls. How can we look at people, process, technology, all these different things, infrastructure, tools, and figure out how to realign so we can dramatically get more of the value out of Agile to today's discussion. Uh, Last slide, please. We work with a range of companies in medtech from sort of Series A backed startups in a number of areas. You'll notice a particularly heavy weight on neurostimulation and diabetes related applications up through enterprise medical device companies from Tandem Diabetes up to J&J Surgical, Medtronic Cranial and Spine. We do work with pharma companies who are building up SAMD capabilities or working on drug delivery devices. And we have a very fun niche practice working with consumer tech companies that are starting to open up subgroups that are bringing medical device technology to on top of their existing consumer tech without turning their core consumer tech into a medical device itself. And that's sort of the range of stuff we do. So, Bernard, feel free to add on as we get in for things. But that's sort of the brief thing. So today's topic, I think what I'd like to do is ask each of you to maybe just introduce yourselves and give a 30-second opinionated statement about why this is an important webinar. And this isn't just like, Agile again in medical devices, what's good about it? And then we'll dive into some discussion if that sounds good. So Bernhard, if you could kick off, why is this worth our time today?
Um, Look, I think we are living in a world where software is a bigger and bigger piece of everything, right? It started becoming more important in business and then personal things 70s and then the 80s with the advent of the PC and Moore's Law and better computing. And then we got the internet, and then we got mobile, and we got cloud, and we got all of these things where software is really pervasive in everything we do. And we are basically building software that touches everything in our lives, right? And it's transformed so many things for better and for worse, and including in the medtech space. And software is something that is not fire and forget. It's always all the technology underneath it is changing, the possibilities, the market, what you connect with, the underlying technologies, your ability to deal with data and to get value out of that. This keeps sort of growing and more important. And so you've got to deal with software, and dealing with software means dealing with change and adapting and not and being efficient at doing that. And so agile was, one of the first methodologies that really uh, addressed that change specifically for software, right? It's not the only one in terms of things that dealt with efficiency and value creation. It came from other things, but it's basically, dominated software development, proven to be kind of the thing that works uh, uh, for for building things that are both robust and can move fast. So we have challenges within this space around how to adapt that, and I think companies continue to struggle with that. But the value of it in general is very, very clear.
Michael, tell us who you are, and maybe why this is worth an hour of your time to join us. And
Yeah, hi everybody. Michael Iglesias here. I'm at Merck and I oversee SAMD, medical device software and companion diagnostic devices. And I think this is important because of all the companies I've been at and worked with, agile software development has always been a challenge, and I think it always will be a challenge, as we've seen with TIR 45, the first edition in 2012, to now it's been edition two. I think it was 2023. So even those TIRs, even those the standards that we practice are constantly being updated. And as back to Bernhard's point, technology evolves, cloud technology evolves, other products come out on the market. It's kind of like, a dog chasing its tail with all these different kinds of technologies, and how do we stay up to date? So that's why I think it's a very good topic to discuss, and always have some of these things that we're going to talk about in the back of our mind.
Jason,
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Jason Gorman. I am at ResMed. I'm responsible for the regulatory product and strategy and delivery portion of the reg team. Um, and, I've been in healthcare for over 30 years now. Hate to say that, but it's true. And I've had a broad range of experiences, from my days in the hospital, uh, implementing clinical operational software tools, um, done product development, led product development teams, and obviously now I'm in the quality and regulatory space. Um, Additionally, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I use a lot of med tech on a personal basis. So I think the points of view I'm going to share today are actually not super focused on the quality and regulatory side, but they kind of come from that experience I have in sort of as multiple stakeholders as a end user patient consumer, and then as a hospital administrator consumer, and then being under pressure to deliver quickly. And I guess the reason I think this topic is important is I still think that I'm a big believer in Agile. And if anything I say today sounds like I'm not, I'm probably not interpreting it right. But I think that there's still a lot of room for growth in leveraging Agile in the med device space. And if you are in an org where you can't talk about Agile without naming a villain called Waterfall, if like the whole basis of Agile is it's not Waterfall, you're probably not doing it right. And if I would also say if your focus is on cadence over value, there's still more evolution to work on.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So with that, Bernhard, let's maybe people on this call have heard of Agile and familiar with it. Maybe they aren't, but let's go back to the core to Jason's point. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to get out of it? And and why is it a little different in med tech, or a little, it's, as I say, Agile's vanilla, in med tech Agile is French vanilla, you know?
Right, right. Um, yeah, let me share a couple slides. I started to talk through this a little bit, right? But right, all the reasons sort of the software change is accelerating. This slide doesn't even have AI sort of in the product, AI around the product, all the ways we're using that as the sort of next set of evolution of how much more pervasive all of this is getting. Um, but really, the fundamental issue is project management approaches were not optimized for change and evolution. And it made sense if you're doing a building or you're doing manufacturing. Initially, those are things that don't change that often, right? So you don't need to optimize for that. But in this case, you really do have to optimize for change, right? Change and not change for change's sake, but change in order to create more value. Um, and so in this time, 70s, 80s, and even before that, there were kind of these fast feedback loop techniques that kind of or methodologies that evolved. So, everyone I'm sure has heard of OODA loops, in the Air Force, John Boyd, in terms of how to have a faster feedback loop and use that to your advantage as a fighter pilot. That was then inspiration for other kinds of fast feedback loop things where, again, you could create value more quickly. Deming with his plan, do, checked, act, who again started here, went to Japan. And so things like the Toyota production system, where the sort of the mantra uh, is Genshi Gembutsu, go and see, and that begat things like total quality management, lean manufacturing techniques that are all about eliminating waste and maximizing value. And that's really where Agile came in as mentioned in, with the manifesto in 2001. So there's a lot of ways of describing it. It's not one methodology. It's not like there is the Agile methodology. You can buy the Agile methodology book. There are a whole bunch of different things that are maybe particular methodologies, uh, but they're really a kind of set of practices and principles, really, for dealing with change, for improving efficiency, reducing waste and maximizing value. So a lot of it is about faster feedback loops, breaking things into smaller chunks and getting feedback quickly on those so you can make adjustments of various kinds. So that's fast development cycles, sprints, Kanban, whatever you want in terms of that, with each cycle focused on creating real customer value. You want to get feedback, whether that's customer feedback, stakeholder feedback, actual production, live feedback, whatever it is in your circumstances, as part of that, and feed that back into the process so that you can change and adjust and make your products better. Um, Part of it, one of the key principles here is actually devolving decision making for faster adjustment improvement. If you remember, I said Genchi Gambutsu, go to the source or go to where it's happening. That's where it's happening. And so you have these concepts of pigs and chickens. I won't go into the details. You can look up agile pigs and chickens, what that means. But essentially, the people that are in the trenches doing the work should have a lot of decision-making power within their context that allows for faster feedback and improvement, and then really, frankly, visibility to everyone, whether they're inside or outside, as to what's going on. So at any time you can see, here's the value we've created, here's where we are, and are able to adjust and to do continuous improvement. And then there are a bunch of practices that have evolved with software to sort of, again, speed up those the feedback loops, like continuous integration, DevOps, automation, to speed up and reduce waste and uncover and fix errors earlier, so that you can build very complex things and not break anything, or very early that you've broken something, so you can track the errors, fix the errors earlier. That's, at least my mental model of agile. There's a bunch of rituals that you can do as part of this, et cetera. There's a lot more detail, but really sort of, if you're doing these kinds of things, I would consider that agile practices. Um, Now, the challenge is there's a lot of different software development practices, and there's a lot of agile practices out there. Not all of them are really compatible with regulatory and quality practices, and not all regulatory and quality practices are are compatible or really adaptable. And there is a sweet spot where that if you are doing certain agile practices and automation practices, and you are doing certain things on the regulatory and quality side, you can really generate a lot more value. We've seen 2 to 3 times efficiency if you get everything right, but no one gets everything right. But still, there's a lot of value if you can get to that sweet spot. Um, uh, so maybe Michael and Jason, just, it'd be great to talk about, the kind of the quality and regulatory practices a little bit, and then we can dive into what is in that sweet spot in between.
Sure, I think I can start here. So I like in the middle of the modern SDLC, the friendly sweet spot, because to me, when I look at both the software development practices on the left and the regulatory quality practices on the right, what I've seen in the middle comes down to like these newer EQMS design control tools, tools like that kind of help automate design controls, risk management. Maybe they integrate with Jira or Azure DevOps. And what we're seeing, what I've seen over the years, is a lot of these platforms are starting to step up as a product or software as a service to their clients, and to show value that, hey, we have a platform that can integrate, or you work in it directly. You do everything that you're already doing, software development. But on the back end, these kinds of tools will help automate and generate all of that documentation needed for regulatory purposes, for quality audits and metrics. So I think that that's kind of a big value, part of the sweet spot that I see every day and so far in my career. And I'm really interested to see how, kind of going into the next generation, so to speak, how artificial intelligence, machine learning, when those get integrated into some of these EQMS tools, how that will even help development teams get their product to the market quicker and have them be safe and more effective.
Excellent.
Jason, maybe you've bridged both of these things as well, right? And
Yeah.
I think why is, and you'd mentioned, agile is a problem in a lot of, or for a lot of organizations. Why is it a problem?
Well, I think I think agile development provides an incredible opportunity for businesses to deliver products more quickly. 100% agree with that, especially, as you're ideating, getting those fast feedback loops are really important. I think where there can be risk though sometimes is when we conflate um, speed and velocity, or cadence and velocity with value, right? So, there's been times, and I've talked to a number of people where the focus becomes so largely on how quickly we can increase the release cadence of a product that we have to make sure that we're delivering value to the right people. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't go fast, but going fast means delivering value to somebody other than the development team, being excited for the release. And to me, this is really important because, having spent a lot of time in the hospital, when you look at enterprise tools and enterprise systems, there is always a cost to update. I usually ask people, you know, who are in industry, it's like, have you ever woken up and you had to get to an early morning meeting, you launch Zoom or Teams or whatever, and you get this message that it needs to update? And you're like, oh, I'm going to be late for this meeting. You have to sit through the update. It's moderately annoying. You get into the meeting, you can't actually tell anything different about it, or worse, your reaction buttons or whatever you like to use in your meeting have moved somewhere. It can be disruptive. So that balance of delivering value and minimizing disruption is exceptionally important. And I think it's important at the enterprise side of things, but it can also be important for lay users who are using, quote unquote consumer apps, but depending on the disease condition, it might not be the same target audience as say an Instagram or a Facebook.
Right.
I,
Right.
I think that, the point you're making, Jason, is that it's sort of a human nature one, that it can be very easy to get caught up in the process and lose sight of the outcome, because the process is big and complicated and comes with its own metrics, but it's sort of, you have to step back and ask why. I'm just going to have a little fun here and show a classic cartoon. I apologize. I think I showed this a couple of years ago in one of our webinars.
Let me
Comic strip,
stop sharing
actually.
here.
Yeah. This is a Doonesbury comic set on the eve of the first Gulf War, and they're soldiers in a foxhole somewhere, in the Persian Gulf. Um, and the commander comes up to them and says, oops, wait, stop share. Anyway, I'll read it to you. It's easier. Commander comes up to them and says, gentlemen, here's your irrigation drill for the day. It's a box of water. To fend off heat disorder, you got to hydrate 6 gallons a day. And he breaks it down to every 10 minutes, you have to drink 1 glass of water, 16 hours a day. Good luck. And the one guy in the foxhole looks at the other one and goes, what happens if we come under attack? And the other guy goes, don't worry, I'll cover you so you can drink water. You know? And that whole point of getting lost between the mission and the what and the how, I think is a really key point. How does that, let me ask you guys, how does that play out in this sweet spot world? What makes it so hard to stay in that sweet spot, that we're talking about?
I think that can be the idea of many chefs in the kitchen. At least when I've seen these very, very large teams, and you have, let's say, three different members from the same quality organization that are on the team. They're all going to have three different interpretations, three different opinions, and the same goes for all of the other stakeholders for that project. And I think that from what I've seen in these larger teams like that, that really is the challenge for that sweet spot. Um, on the other side of that, I've been part of very, very small teams that were able to stay within that sweet spot and stay within, build compliant, safe, and effective devices, and also get them out to market, get those software releases on that regular cadence to their customers.
Yeah, and I would say that, again, I'm kind of leaning into what I mentioned before, but I think once you build a process that kind of lets you exist in that sweet spot, it's like building a muscle, right? And I think organizations should be able to very quickly like respond to something, update a piece of software, and release it very quickly, right? That is a muscle that any modern software med device company should be able to exercise. I think where it becomes difficult is understanding how and when to best exercise that muscle. I mean, I've mentioned this, I think when we've chatted before, Randy, I feel like sometimes one of the missing, and this is very dependent on, the environment you're in. But I think sometimes one of the missing things in tier 45 is sort of the difference between an increment and a release, right? So I think when you make the increment and release a one-to-one relationship, you do again want to just make sure that you're delivering value.
Yeah, I think I think that's really the key is right. Sort of, you should optimize your process for value creation, right? Um, that is the big thing. Value creation for a medical device company that has a class 3 implantable medical device is maybe different than it is for Instagram or even for Amazon Web Services, right? Those are two very different things. Amazon Web Services is a giant sets of services that need to uh, 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 form the infrastructure for, you know, giant amounts of work of various kinds that are happening on top of it, and it needs to evolve very quickly without breaking anything, right? So they need to optimize for being able to get changes out really quickly uh, and without breaking other things. So they have to very much. That's why sort of cloud native as an architecture and principle has evolved, and their ability to really have kind of risk management and automation around everything in their process. So as we learned as we were working with them in on TIR 115, the use of cloud computing in medical devices, they are making thousands and thousands of changes every day, and it's all happening on an automated basis, automated testing, automated rollbacks, et cetera, automated sort of adjustments towards resiliency on that, which is really expensive. But for their business, that is the automation and that is the optimization you need to do. Um, in the case of the surgical robots or active implantables, chances are that same optimization and that is not what you should be investing in. While it's nice, and in some cases you get, if you adopt cloud native architecture, et cetera, you get some of that kind of for free as a result of that. But you've got to optimize for other things as part of that. Nevertheless, there's optimization, even if your releases are not thousands in a day, that you can and should do around this, and you need to focus on that. And the key point there is not focusing purely on what's happening inside of a development team and what's happening with the developers and the project managers, et cetera. It is around optimizing your kind of end-to-end process and then seeing where within this it makes sense to have faster feedback loops and more automation.
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to add to that, and I think it's really important too, is um, I think the subheading of this meeting is about the fast feedback loops. And I think one thing that is challenging in the med device space that is less challenging for an Amazon or a Facebook is just the pure volume of users and behavioral signals you get back, right? Um, Facebook can change the thumbs up icon, and about 14 seconds later, they'll have millions of data points on whether people like it or not. Um, and one of the most important things of a fast feedback loop is who is providing the feedback and how do they represent whoever that is that you're trying to deliver value to. And that's a challenge, I think, in a lot of med tech companies and organizations because you do run the risk of it starts to only become the feedback loop within this very small team That's the product development team that sort of already believes in what they're doing, which is important that they believe in what they're doing, right? But like the sort of getting external feedback when you're not just talking about like technically does it work, but you're asking more validation type things. Is it delivering the value you want? That's a complex thing, and I think it requires some thought in how that can feed really the true intention of agile development.
Yeah, I think the the if we go back, right, a lot of, if you are thinking about a physical device, right, um, you've got feedback that you are getting as you are developing that. You're doing some design, you're doing some human factors work, etc. Um, but even the most complex device is not as complex as as a lot of the software and doesn't change as much. So you're not, once you are out there in the real world with it, chances are you don't have a lot of ability to adjust that, right? And even as you are, there's limits to what you can show people and what you can get feedback on. So a lot of the practices around how you do that and how you get that external feedback, as I have seen, uh, is not really optimized for software, and the fact that you can get feedback more often on things and in smaller increments. And so we see this a lot with kind of both in-house and outside human factors folks. How do they integrate into the design process? They're used to something big up front and something big at the end, when really a more agile process would be more feedback more frequently with real users during the process. Um, and so what we've seen are things like design, again, things like design sprints and having human factors as part of that. But that requires human factors folks to adjust from how they have done things before, and that some of them can do that and some are not up for that. And structurally, it's also a different kind of thing. But that's the thing that you can do, is actually get better user experience and human factors for your software by getting feedback more often. And then once you are actually out in the market, you can you can instrument your software to see what's actually going on, right? That's one of the beautiful things about software is you can see what's going on in real time and say, oh, we thought people would behave this way, but they're actually behaving this way, right? That's what product analytics does for you. That's what those tools are there for. But very often, even with large companies, it's the outside of the marketing department. It's the first time when we're talking to people through these things, it's the first time they've even considered product analytics as part of what they're doing. But you can get more feedback more quickly. So use that, right? So that's the challenge, is kind of like what how if you have one part of the process that is spinning really, really quickly, and other parts of the process that are really not spinning quickly, then you're just going to have this impedance mismatch. And we see that impedance mismatch, especially early days, and also because of how groups are organized, an awful lot. Um, Michael, I'm
Yeah.
sure that resonates with you.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with Jason and you, Bernhard, on this topic. I think that if you really focus on iterative human factors for your product and getting the value out of your product, for me that goes back to having your QMS and all your processes need to be right sized and flexible to support that. I've worked on teams that did these iterative, like maybe every incremental release they would do a human factors study. We would take that feedback, go back into sprints, and go back and touch up our requirements, risk management, and then produce the release. And that was very successful. And then I've also worked on teams that waited to the very last end at validation for a summative a study, and it didn't go so well. So that was part, and again, it goes back to the whole agile process and how do you bake the design controls with the value of bringing that product to market and for your patients. And if your patients or your users are seeing that product being built over time or over a short period of time of its development life cycle, then when you get to market, there should be no nasty surprises. And again, I like what you mentioned, Bernhard, about your product analytics, not just analytics on the front end of how people are interacting with the product. What features are they using the most of? What features are they not using? But also the back end. How is my product performing? Do I have a ton of bugs? What is the severity of those bugs? Do those bugs pose a security, safety, or privacy risk? But again, for me in quality, that's just my brain working around quality metrics. But I think at the end of the day, that all has to be baked in, going back to your sweet spot between regulatory quality compliance and, good software development and like an end-to-end product life cycle.
And just one thing to add here, because this is, I think, a really good thread. This is where I think some creativity in how you manage that sweet spot becomes really important, right? Because, sometimes we can default to, you know, if every time we try to get external feedback during development, it has to be done under a human factors protocol consistent with appropriate standards, it becomes a really weighty process. And there's other ways to capture, like not to eliminate that, right? But you can have those levels maybe less frequent and then have more informal external testing. I mean, we used to bring people in all the time at one of the companies I was working at. We didn't count it as any of our human factors testing. We didn't even fully count it as usability, but we had this sort of interesting little space where we considered it a form of iterative validation. So we took some credit for it, but we didn't put the cost and the weight on it
Yeah.
that made it really hard to repeat. And I know that there are some companies out there too that for simple usability workflows, like they're it's not hard for them to gather a handful of people and ask some questions, maybe on UX and UI related things, but those can all be feeders so that when you do your summative usability testing, it's a little more predictable on where you'll land. So it's just a way to think about it.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think it's really this goes back to what you're optimizing for around that, and like on I mean there is a uh uh, my sense is, in terms of what you are doing for formative human factors, you've got a lot of leeway to do things around that, right? And so, when you're going testing for usability, you're going through things, you, as part of that, having human factors, eyes and ears, understanding, oh, you know what, there's a potential use error here, and with this there's confusion on, you're trying to do in the field 12 tests at the same time with these vials and whatever, and people get confused between these things, and so we really have to be careful or maybe limited it. Those are the kinds of things that, like, with the right experts that have seen these patterns and can do the analysis, even if you're doing it in small chunks in kind of 3 user Thursdays, or et cetera, that can happen. And I think, the same thing goes for risk management, certainly cybersecurity risk management and patient risk management. It's also, there's some things that you can figure out, big picture ahead of time with a preliminary hazard analysis, et cetera. But then there are some things where you have to actually look at a change and say, did we introduce anything new? And that's work, because when you're doing agile, it's emerging, right? You don't have all the big design up front. You need to go analyze that, and someone needs to be part of the process, right? And that's where I think we get a big challenge if you are organized around a team that is doing things and someone who's used to coming at the beginning and at the end, and is not, and you don't have staffing for continuous feedback. in the process, then you're going to have this big impedance mismatch and a lot of stuff at the beginning and at the end. And if you say, well, we're one team, writ large, writ small, with maybe part time, maybe full time, whatever that looks like, and then you can say we are trying to optimize for something and optimizing for value creation, you might change that staffing and say, you know what, we need actually more systems engineers in this, or more quality, or certainly more testing. Maybe we need more human factors in there or not. It all depends on sort of what you're optimizing for and sort of the value throughput, and optimizing for that value throughput for your company, right? It's going to be different for ResMed. It's going to be different for Merck. It's going to be different for a startup that is doing AI algorithms in a radiology ecosystem. But you know there are all of these tools and building blocks. It's a question of how you put them together, and I would say the biggest challenges are less sort of tools, process, patterns, how you design your quality management system, for change and things like that. It's a lot of it is people and organizational structure and alignment of values. That is I would say, one of the thing where when we are doing efficiency optimization for a group, that is where the most challenging part, and where the potential for value creation sometimes goes to die, unfortunately. So,
Let me ask a question in response to this is somebody who submitted something really thoughtful ahead of time, and I think plays in here now, a question, which is that um, our IT, basically our IT teams and our development teams are all over Agile, but we're really having a hard time winning over trust and engagement from cybersecurity. I'll elaborate on this: human factors, quality, clinical trials. Like, how do we engage those other people? So I'd say, rather than general, it's great to explain general things, but if you can give examples of success stories you've seen, where at the other side, those you've engaged those teams and they've actually said, wow, this is better. Or, my favorite line would be like, they're like, you can have Agile back when you pry it from my cold dead fingers. You've won them over. Um, can you talk a little bit about, any of you, about success stories for that, and what have been the key elements?
Yeah, I think for me, success elements of that would be getting the key stakeholders in early, have everybody understand, here's what we're going to do, here's the processes, here's the requirements that we need to do, and all collaborate and work together to come up with a plan of how this project or this product is going to be successful. I have seen where some companies, the development team in other areas go and work and build a product, and they only check in with quality for the phase gate reviews, and then quality says, "Oh no, you did all this wrong. You didn't follow the process." But just think about it like, well, what if you had a quality person as part of the team that was more engaged with the team early on to help them build out? Here's how you're going to meet and get through these milestones and these phase gates with ease, and not have to have quality look like the police. So, just my 2 thoughts or 2 cents on that.
And have you
Jason,
seen,
sorry.
go ahead, go for it.
I've got a bunch of opinions here, but what have you seen there?
Yeah, well, I think so I think it's very dependent on where you're starting the conversation. I think if you're talking about, like, we want to make a transformative process where we rethink how we're doing software development and we want to be more agile, right? You really have to get that stakeholder buy-in. And I think you have to have someone that can lead that conversation. That, I'm going to go back to Randy's ice cream analogy, that, Agile in med device is a bit more French vanilla than just vanilla, right? I think I have shared this with everybody, that's with the three of you at least, right? I personally have an allergic. I love agile development. I personally have an allergic reaction when I read the Agile Manifesto because there are some things in there that really become hard to manage, like around a quality system. So, but I think that there are really important ways to think about when you're talking about the sweet spot. What are the value points that Agile delivers? And what are some of the value points that the quality system can help deliver so that the teams are just working and they happen to be following a quality system with their outputs, right? I think when you have to redo a lot of work um, at the end of what a sprint or a release because the normal day-to-day work doesn't deliver the records that you need to be able to release under your quality system, that's a bunch of excess waste, right? So I think that when you find ways to optimize it and you sort of make sure everybody understands, cybersecurity team, they should love the fact that the team is working on a way to be able to handle a 0-day vulnerability faster than anybody else. That's great, right? They should like that. And then even with the engineering team, sometimes there can be concerns with like an exaggerated amount of documentation. But when you can think about ways to make that um, documentation less painful and more automated, and documentation via code, or when you can also talk about the value of having it as a way when you're onboarding new engineers that they don't have to try to figure out how the whole platform works from day one. Like there's different ways. You have to assign value to everybody in that room, or you will have people that feel like they're trying to block it. So you need transformative behavior from representative members of those functions to help enable the implementation of a end-to-end process. But if you're
Yeah.
dragging people kicking and screaming, it's going to be nearly impossible. And if you inform people that we're moving to an agile development process, you're going to get more kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like any organizational change, right? You need to have both kind of sponsorship from the top. Typically it is an organization. People do report to people if that is coming from leadership, and typically it needs to come pretty high in the organization because you're touching so many different parts of the organization, right? But it's in some ways easy to look at like the worst case, right? The bad, where it's like you've I'll describe on the development side like an anti-pattern. I just want to code, and I'm just going to get stuff out there, and that's agile because it's just like deliver stuff, etc. And even outside the medical device space, that is not how real companies that have real products that have real value do things, right? You quickly run into a morass of bad things where it's like, well, it doesn't really do what we want it to do, and it's buggy as hell. And so you have to have some, testing and automation, and that's why you have things like test-driven development and behavior-driven design and functional automation testing and continuous integration. So that sort of like what I call cowboy agile, um, that's a bad thing, right? On the other side, you have the uh, this I am just looking at the quality management system. I not the why, but this is what it says, and this is what the regulation says. So therefore, we can't do agile, and we have to do the methodology I feel comfortable with. That happens, and I see both of those things. You know, the people that should be leading those, one, how they hire is an important thing. You want people who are uh, problem solvers in general in all of those roles, rather than just sort of I follow the role. This is what it is, kind of it throughout your team structure, right? So hiring for those types of things, and then someone, not everyone needs to know everything about quality, about regulatory, about technical architecture, but you need to know enough about what the real fundamental things are on the other side as well, right? So you have to be, if all you're saying, we just want to do agile and quality is like this afterthought, who cares? They can go do their thing. Okay, well, that's a bad attitude. If you actually want to do agile, you got to understand what quality actually is, because your activities have to result in quality outputs and evidence of that. And the same on the other side. Understand agile better and try to be a problem solver.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen this before in other areas like legal, right? There are legal people who are like, it is way easier to just say, nope, nope, you can't do that. Nope, 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 nope. Oh, and we need this, etc. That is easier. It is not necessarily aligned towards creating business value. There
And
are
it's not
really
a
good legal people who are about uh, that I look for in projects where they are involved and should be involved, that are problem solvers. What are you trying to do? Here's how we might not be able to do that, but we could do something like this, and they work with you to solve the problem. Those are the people you need, sponsorship and the right people who are willing to understand what why they want to do agile and what they need to do on a quality from a quality or human factors or whatever perspective, and come up with a solution that works for everyone, right?
We got a question I want to address here, which I think builds on this, so I'll throw it out to all of you, which is basically, how do you do training and ongoing support of an entire R&D organization, not just your engineers around this? And I guess I would add that, are there pitfalls if you bring in a generic, this is going to sound pretty self-serving, sorry, but are there pitfalls if you bring in a traditional agile software firm and turn them loose on a med tech firm? How do you convey that? Does everybody do it together? Do you do separate? Like, what works for the upfront and then the ongoing coaching or advising?
Oh.
I
I
just to pick up on the second half of that, right? I also think sometimes organizations feel like agile is a destination, and of anything that should be iterative, agile itself and how you implement agile needs to be agile as well, right? So I actually think, continued education and learning best practices and iterating on your processes, working with the team is really important once you think you've moved to agile, because I don't think you're ever done moving to agile. It's almost antithetical to using the word, right? Um, to the point about, drop shipping agile into a med tech firm, I think it goes back to a little bit of what we talked about before, right? You have to have buy-in from, I think, the key stakeholders, and it is a change management process that is more complicated than med device change control,
right.
right? Because it has to do with behaviors and feelings and experience and all of those things. And if that's not done correctly, you'll never get there, right? You'll just have pockets or sort of having some disagreement on, what the terminology means. Like, are those things really required? Is that what they meant by agile? And it just, it can create a lot of unnecessary speed bumps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think part of that that the center of your diagram there is not only just quality, regulatory compliance and software development, but also kind of creating the harmony between all the stakeholders and understanding across the organization. If it's like me in quality, if I go to my engineering organization, I say, okay, what do you guys want to do? What methodologies do you want to use to build these products? And they say agile, V model, whatever. I can then go back and say, okay, how can I bake that into the QMS to make it flexible and right sized for what they want to do? And I think that kind of goes across all the different disciplines and stakeholders within an organization. So I think that I do agree with Jason. I think that's very important to have at the organizational level.
Yeah, so I would say, obviously, this is a big problem unless you use a company like Orthogonal, of course. I'm only partially facetious in this. Look, what we have seen is, I think the analogy I look at is, like there's what you need to do is not, you need to do agile for med device and you need quality for agile, right? You need, and so when you're looking at that, like I think there are agile coaching and consulting companies that are great at getting agile, helping teams go through agile. They have great techniques, great ways of doing that, lots of different things. And those are valuable, but they're just going to help the development team be better at agile. They're not going to, and it's not going to solve the fundamental issue, which is you need your entire uh, like how you how you do software, how you get it to the market, including quality, including everything else, to be more efficient and using more fast feedback loop techniques as part of the value creation process. So it's a little bit like learning a language, right? And so it's a probably a very particular language. And I know the best way of learning a language is immersion, right? It is not go read a book, do a workshop, et cetera. It's go and practice and speak, right? Um, and hear and engage, et cetera. And I think that's been true for agile for a while, but it's absolutely true in the context of agile and med device, where the people who are architects, who are product managers, who are testers, et cetera, need to know the context of what they're doing inside the quality management system. They're doing a lot of the quality work, and quality and regulatory and systems engineering need to know, oh, this is the rhythm and this is how, and this is the tooling. So, uh, we have found that it does start with getting enough buy-in or sponsorship. Yes, here is the value we can create if we do this at the top, and getting the buy-in at a high enough level so that you're not fighting some silo turf war kind of thing. And then it's the best thing I find is start with a pilot team, right, on something. That's a classic change management thing, is find a good pilot team where you have people on the quality side, on the architecture, the dev side, et cetera, who are ready, willing, and able to be problem solvers and are enthusiastic about doing it, that can do that. That's the team you want to pick first to go about it. And then you want to be very careful with them as sort of like showing their success as they're doing things. So that gets buy-in for the organizations that, oh, we're actually doing, here are the metrics. If you were collecting metrics before, here's what we're doing differently, and here's how this works. At that point, you now have something that people want to do. And then you can actually use agile methods to propagate that. That team can add more people from out into it. You can do pairing on that, and then you have that process bifurcate into a second project, and then you do pairing again with that, and so that way you can multiply that process out. And in the meantime, you still have coaching and you have other things that sort of propagate into the general thing. You have the chance to update your quality management system, embed certain things and toolings like EQMS and ALM, PLM tooling, et cetera. And then you kind of build those things out. But it's like, so you don't boil the ocean, but you do it with a team that knows what they're doing, working with people that know what they're doing, so that then that as a culture can get propagated through. That's what we've seen work, but it is challenging for sure, right? If some of those things aren't there, it can be really hard to make progress. So,
The
And
organizational biome that's agile friendly, right?
well,
friendly enough, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
think
oh, sorry,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say real quick, but I won't throw my 2 cents in there, Bernard. I think that, kind of when I think back to that slide with all of the companies that you work with, you had the big tech companies on one side. If you were to take someone that is used to that industry and then they're used to how Agile is done there, doing, like you said, Instagram software releases, and then you go put them in a med tech company and say, okay, you're going to do software. It's agile, but we're now under even more scrutiny and regulation. I think that it's that they have to understand from a training perspective that agile is like a flavor within medtech, or medtech has a flavor of agile, and then they have to build out how do we do agile, but under all of these compliance requirements and regulations. And that's really where you have to set the stage for the people that are not really used to making that transition.
Yeah. And I know we're at time. I just had one last closing thought from my end, but we've talked a lot about where there's like competition between agile and quality systems, but at the same time, there's like a really obvious bridge to me, right? Because what's a pillar of a quality system if not continuous improvement? And what's agile if it is not constantly delivering improvement, right? So I think that when you can sort of have a start from a place of common understanding, it does make some of that behavioral transition a little easier.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that makes sense. Look, there is uh, it, it, the biggest challenges that organizations have are kind of organizational structure, incentives, and culture, right? And that's hard no matter what kind of change. And the larger your company is, and the more fragmented and the more siloed it is, the harder it is to do that. And frankly, uh, it's I think there are some industries where it's even more siloed than medical devices, but there's a lot of just siloing that's happened. Pharma is more siloed than medical device is in terms of that, and I think it's a lot more about breaking those down to get value. But the value is clearly there, and the other part of it is it's sort of like you have to. Uh, it used to be even I don't know 10 years ago, even up to 5 years ago, there were certain areas that were like you have to deal with it now, right? Diabetes has always been really, really um, pretty advanced in terms of connected digital ecosystems, use of mobile apps, and oh, you got your CGM and your insulin pump, et cetera. And so obviously you have and highly competitive area, whereas orthopedics and surgery was not in terms of that. Well, fast forward right now, half the work we're doing is around the whole surgical suite and the ecosystem around surgical robots and surgical planning and digital implants, et cetera. Now, software and the ecosystems are are where the competition uh, is happening very much. So you got to be able to move fast enough. You got to be able to make changes, and you got to be able to take advantage of technology and of data and insights and inferences on that. And agile is an important tool as part of it. So, you know, however you get to it, you've got to deal with it and in order to get that value. So
That's great. So, Jason, your final thought was, folks, these aren't incompatible. They have the common DNA, which is continuous improvement. Focus on that and don't let other stuff get in the way. Bernhard, you got to get there one way or another because it's just where everything's going. And if you can't figure out how to get the value you achieve, not to do agile, but the value that companies that achieve agile get when they do it well, you're in real trouble.
software is eating the world, AI is eating software, therefore AI is eating the world.
Right.
If you don't
Michael,
engage with that, you'll get eaten. So
there you go. Michael, what's your closing thought for us here?
Yeah,
Make
my
it
closing
brilliant.
thought.
Just
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. That's all. Okay.
yeah, I would say to kind of like Bernhard said, look at right sizing your QMS processes, invest in eQMS platforms. A lot of these have AI machine learning features already. They will help your development team uh, generate the documentation and hopefully get the organization their products quicker to market and continue to be safe and effective.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, all of you. This was a good, lively discussion. Thank you to everybody in the audience for your joining us, spending your time submitting questions. I apologize to those who we didn't get to answer all of your questions. If you want to hear more
I
on any of this, let us know.
Yeah, I will say on that. I know we haven't been able to. Some of the questions are very sort of nuanced from individuals, but if you want to just do a one-on-one, and happy to kind of answer questions and provide advice. So reach out to us. I'm happy to have conversations with people on this. So,
We do this to have conversations, not to tell you what we think.
well, no, I'm going to tell you what I think,
Okay.
but also understand what your problems are.
Got it. Well,
So,
thank you, everybody, and we will see you again next month.
yep.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.